Well, hey everyone, welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. I'm thrilled to have you here. When we planned this kind of semester of Lunch and Learns, we took last week off because of spring breaks, not realizing that some of our largest schools were going to be on spring break this week. So our student ministry was off last week. We figured this was the week, and I think we had a mix-up on the whole Wooddale calendar this year. So thank you to those of you who are here because you're in for a treat today. You get the opportunity to hear from Tiffany Bobendrier. Tiffany is a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the Twin Cities and does just an amazing job in counseling. She does wonderful work with people who've experienced trauma in their life and does relational counseling with husbands and wives. But what many of you maybe don't know about Tiffany is Tiffany grew up here at Wooddale Church, and so this was her home church. She grew up when we had a pastor here named Leith Anderson, and he actually used to hang out with Leith's sons. I was hearing some stories about hanging out with Leith's sons in Leith's office back in the day, and so if you want some of those stories, you may have to stick around afterwards to hear some of those. Tiffany graduated from Bloomington Jefferson High School, is that right? And then went to the University of Minnesota, and her family is a very unique family. You may recognize the names Larry and Nancy Gaston. You might recognize them from being at Wooddale over the years. You might recognize them from like being the good neighbor on WCCO. Their family either adopted or fostered over 20. Hundreds of foster. Yeah. So an amazing story. And so, and I'm not going to steal all of Tiffany's thunder here on her family, but God has done some great things. She's married to Dave. They've got 4 kids. And she was working for me just as she graduated from college and told me today that she has a son in college. And I'm going to go home and cry, and but no, I'm just thrilled to have Tiffany here. And before she comes up, one new thing on your tables today is a little business card that looks like this that talks about Lunch and Learns, and it's just a really simple way to stay informed with what's going on. There's a QR code there about the speakers and our schedule, and these are just things that you can hand to people that you work with, or if you don't want to bring that big handout that we have all the time, just something you could stick in your purse or your wallet and share with others to let them know what's coming up. And then finally, one schedule change. Todd Mulliken was scheduled to speak for us, I believe it was May 21st, which is that correct? On the back there, May 21st. Todd will not be speaking that day because he is the 16th. He's teaching a class and tried to get out of it, couldn't get out of it. So we substituted Todd with a guy named Willard Harley, who wrote the book His Needs, Her Needs, which is one of the top 20 best-selling marriage books of all time. And if you go to Amazon today, it's number 76 today after 30 years of existence. It sold more than 2 million copies, and Bill agreed to come and hang out with us, and he's not even charging us to hang out for the day. He is 83 years old and has more wisdom when it comes to marriage and relationships than almost anybody that I have ever met. And so his wife is going to be with us that day. Their story is an incredible story. The book His Needs, Her Needs is about building an affair-proof marriage, and it was written after an affair was part of their story and what God did to restore their marriage, but it's helped really millions of couples around the world. And so just that one change for you to be aware of, and we'll be promoting that. And that will be a day that we serve lunch to you all too, like where you don't have to pay or bring your own lunch. So if you want a free lunch, just mark it down for that day. Tiffany, why don't you come on up here, and would you welcome back to Wooddale Church somebody who has been on our staff, grew up here, and is God's using in incredible ways. Great to see you, Tiffany.
Thank you. Is this one on? Can you guys hear me? Is this on? Okay, I can't. It doesn't. It's actually really nice. You don't hear like the echo like you normally hear when you're on a microphone up here. Thank you for that really kind introduction. And it is a privilege to be back here. It's fun to see familiar faces and things like that, and just to be here. So I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I know Brian kind of gave a bio, if you will, but just how I really identify myself, and then why I'm here before I dig in. So when I think of how I identify myself, I think of 3 things. I'm a child of God, I'm a wife, and I'm a mom. Okay, because those are the 3 things I'm the proudest of, and those are the 3 things that I really identify with and claim. Okay, I also, yes, happen to be a trauma-informed trainer. I also happen to be an adoption support group leader. I also happen to be a licensed professional counselor. But I really only have those roles because of the ways that God has led my life through the other things that I claim. And that's just a really important part of who I am. And so I like to tell people that right away. Why am I here, though? I'm here because I'm passionate about healthy relationships, right? I'm here, obviously, because I know Brian and some other people here at Wooddale, but they know I'm passionate about healthy relationships, and that's why they brought me here. As he mentioned, I grew up in a family that did foster care. So when my husband and I felt God calling us to adoption, we thought we were ready. Like, we were totally prepared for this thing because I had all this life history. And then we actually started parenting. And we were completely shocked about all the things we didn't know. Because adoption only exists because of pain and brokenness, okay? Children were designed to be raised by their biological families. And something horrible had to happen for that to not happen for these kids. And there's a truth that if there's any pain in your life or my life, if it's not resolved, it stays with us until it's healed. And that even includes pain as an infant. So we didn't realize this. We did not know this until we started seeing the evidence of this pain in our home. And that led my husband and I onto this tireless journey to learn everything we could about early relational wounds, because that's what that break in early caregiving is a relational wound for these children. My children all came to us under the age of 1, and they still had this pain. And so we wanted to learn everything we could to parent them well. And God, in his grace, took us on our own journeys. And we learned so much about not only how to parent our children better, but his design for relationships and what that means in our life. And once I've learned that, I can't help but share that with other people. So that's why I'm here. Like, it has become a passion in me that he's ignited. That is what has led me to actually go ahead and go back to school and get my counseling degree so that I can help families really strengthen relationships so they can strengthen their family units and break cycles in some places too. So I do want to just kind of give a heads up that I'm going to be given a really broad overview. I think it's obvious that we can know that relationships are complex. There's a lot of nuances. I can't tackle every single one in an hour. So my overview is going to be broad, and there's a risk of oversimplifying in that. I recognize that. So let's just name that up front. I also do really truly believe, though, that the basic concepts are foundational enough that the simpler I can keep it, hopefully that will keep us out of the weeds of the nuances, okay? So before I get started, well, actually, I'll give you a little heads up on kind of where I'm going to go. Is it that top button? Nope, wrong way. Which one? Bring me back. Which button do I push? The right one. Okay, there we go. That's going to be kind of our the path we're taking. And if you read the description, and hopefully that was kind of spelled out in that, so there's no surprises. And so what I want you to do is actually think through what you're hoping to get out of today, okay? Take a minute, just check in with yourself. What am I here for? What's going on in my life? What do I maybe need to set aside to listen well for 45 minutes? What was I hoping to hear when I came today to hear Tiffany speak? When I heard it was going to be about relationships, when I read the description, whatever it is that brought you here. What were you hoping for? And the reason I ask you that is if we're in tune for that, you'll be more likely to hear it, okay? And if I miss it, then maybe you can ask a question about it at the end. So it really comes down to this. We are created for relationship. I really think it's that simple. God created us for relationship. From the cradle to the grave, relationships matter. And that's how we are designed to thrive, okay? The Bible supports this. Right away in Genesis 1, right? The Lord said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. I will never forget the day I actually, that word stood out to me. I was in seminary at the time, and we were talking about the Trinity, and I was like, oh my goodness. It hit me that we are made in the image of a relational God. He is relationship, okay? The next chapter, he creates Adam. It's not good for man to be alone. Let me create a suitable helper for him. The Hebrew word that's used in that passage for suitable helper actually means perfect complement. So this isn't someone just to help him, right? Take care of the animals and the plants and all that kind of stuff. This is his perfect complement is who God designed. Ecclesiastes 4, 2 are better than one, okay? There's a Hebraic word for love that actually sounds like breath, like you're breathing in and out. And if we think of the whole Bible, it's really a love story about a broken relationship and God's love for us that brings it back to healing, okay, from Genesis to Revelation. Revelation. Sociology and psychology also supports this. In the 1760s, there was a Catholic bishop. They didn't have the research back then, but he recognized enough to see that children in orphanages were what he called dying from sadness, okay? In the 30s and 40s, along the same lines, they started recognizing kids who had their physical needs met but not their emotional needs were languishing, and that's where the term failure to thrive was coined. Around the same time, John Bowlby started studying this, and he saw that the emotional connection was directly related to children's well-being, and that we all have this effective dependency, is what he calls it. That means that relationships are actually a source of strength and a sign of strength for us when we have healthy relationships in our life. Science also supports this. Okay, I won't go into all the details of these studies. These are just a few that I want to highlight because I think they're really fun. Like at heart, I'm a scientist and I can geek out about how the brain's wired and all that kind of stuff. There is a study that shows that loneliness raises blood pressure to the point that it doubles our risk of heart attack and stroke. There's a study that talks about congestive heart failure. Those who are dealing with that, the state of their marriage is just as strong of a predictor of their survival as the severity of their symptoms. This next one is kind of interesting. Out of Ohio State University, they took like a vacuum type device and caused women to get blisters on their hands. Not sure why these women signed up for this, but they did. And then they had them fight with their husbands. And they found that the nastier the fight, the longer it took for those blisters to heal. Which actually means the opposite too, right? The more secure the relationship, the less nasty the fight was, the quicker that those blisters healed. The longest study we have on relationship is called the Harvard Men's Study. You can look up a TED Talk about this. It's a longitudinal study that has gone over 80 years. And it shows that the number one predictor of health is supportive relationships. And then Naomi Essenberger out of the University of California has done lots of work with brain scans. And she has shown that seclusion and isolation, which we can hear as the absence of relationship, actually registers in our brain the exact same way that physical pain does. So when we don't have relationship that is healthy, we experience it just as though we experience physical pain. Okay? So if all of this is true, you'd think that relationships would be easy, right? Like, we're designed for this thing. Why isn't it easier? Let me introduce you to a word that has really changed how I see relationships and how I do relationships and understand them, and that's the word attachment. John Bowlby, who I mentioned on the slide earlier, he's the founder of attachment theory. And when we think of the word attachment, like we think of things that talk about like fondness or affection, right? Like that little girl's so attached to her blankie, right? Teenagers these days are really attached to their phones. Somebody might be attached to the idea of like becoming a pop star or a professional athlete, right? They're pulled towards these things. And that's an appropriate way to use the word. But when we think of attachment in the realm of like developmental psychology or human development and psychology, this is how we define it, okay? Attachment describes the biologically hardwired design that each of us has to seek, form, and maintain close connections with other people. I'm going to say that again. Attachment describes the biologically hardwired design by God, that's not in the definition, but I know that to be true, that each of us has to seek, form, and maintain close connections with other people. That's what attachment is. And when we have these close connections with other people, we have what's called a safe haven and a secure base. So a safe haven is someone who's got your back. They're there for you, right? They're going to protect you. You have a safety net when you need them. And a secure base is that sense of courage that relationships give us, where you can go and you can tackle the world because you know you've got someone in your corner. There was a 2008 study out of the University of Virginia who actually had people look at the slope of a hill. They put on a really heavy backpack, and they're supposed to estimate the slope of a hill. And they found that if they had a friend close by them, they always estimated it to be less steep. that hill didn't seem so hard to climb if they had a close friend with them. That gives me chills just saying that out loud. That's amazing. And the thing I love about this science stuff and why I like to quote studies is it just illustrates the things that God, we already know about God, right? That's spelled out in the Bible. It's so fun. So I think all of us can probably agree that relationships are important. Whether they're easy or they're hard for us, we just understand that they're a part of life. There's something about them, right? The fact that you're here probably proves that point. There's something that just is. And we all have this sense of attachment in our bones, whether we had a word for it or not. But it doesn't look the same for everybody. And we may sometimes wonder why. Why is it harder for me to attach? Why is it harder for me to have a healthy relationship? So let me talk a little bit about how attachment is formed, because I think that can shed light into that question. So if we look at attachment, it really develops in the homes that we grow up in, okay, or the environments we were raised in. I'm going to use some general terms. I might say mom more than dad. I might say home, assuming that was your story. I know that there are differences out there. I want to name that. I can't talk about all of them now, okay? I do need to stay in some general terms just to get those basic concepts. So when a child is born, they have a need instantly, right? They come out of the womb crying because, oh my gosh, their whole world just got turned upside down. And what happens? They express that need. That's the cry. Somebody help me here. This doesn't make sense to me. And a caregiver responds and meets that need. The child relaxes, right? If you think about it, that baby's right here on mama's chest. The child relaxes, and the world is right until the next need comes. And this happens thousands and thousands and thousands of times over the course of a child's life. And this is what leads to a sense of trust, which leads to what we would call healthy attachment, okay? The baby learns, I have a need, I can express that need. Someone's going to meet that need. Oh, okay, I'm safe, I'm secure, okay? When this happens, we feel safe, we feel seen, soothed, and secure. When we feel safe, that means you're loved. That's the message that we get from that. Seen, you are important to me, important enough that I'm going to meet your need. Your feelings matter enough to soothe them, and you belong here. Oh my gosh, you guys, if I feel these things, I feel like I can take on the world, right? If I'm in a relationship where I feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure, loved like I belong, I could tackle the world. This is what we are designed for. And we live in a fallen world, and life doesn't always go that way, right? So in the real world, what if mom has postpartum depression? Okay? What if she can't be there every time? It's not her fault. What if you have a couple kids and you're bathing one and the other one gets a skinned knee? You can't instantly jump up maybe and help because you've got a little, toddler in the bathtub. For me, my oldest child actually spent a month in the hospital in the PICU. I had 2 other boys at home who needed mom too. But at the time, I needed to be in the hospital with my son. Okay? I recognized that had an impact on them. Okay? Life happens. We live in the real world. And these are just everyday things, right? We also know that there are the extremes. There's abuse, there's neglect, and those have a significant impact too. But the good news is that healthy attachment happens when caregivers perceive the cues and respond adequately in a timely manner most of the time. Okay, we don't have to be perfect. So we can all exhale. We don't have to get it right every time. And there's actually science that says it's good to get it wrong sometimes. But more times than not, we want to meet those kids' needs. And when that happens, we grow up feeling safe and secure in the world, okay? And when it doesn't, though, that adds up too. And that's really important to recognize, is that over time, our experiences add up in a way that shape our view of the world. And these attachment needs are so primal, they're so core in us that when they're not met, we have this angst that they have to get met, okay? We'll do anything it takes to get them met. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but let's watch a little video that highlights this.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm my good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
That baby tried everything, right? I mean, that's a tiny infant. I mean, big enough to sit up and stuff, but tried everything. When we don't get those needs met, that was just 2 minutes of life of mom not responding to me. Oh, like that angst that baby had. And it's the same for us. If we have to, we will try whatever it takes to get connection back with those that are most important to us, because that's how critical it is, okay? And as time and experience accumulate, right, we get this felt sense of the world around us. We basically get this like inner working model of what we expect relationships to be. Okay, the world's a fun and a safe place, and people are either going to be there for me. I can really feel secure and do life, or not. People let me down. And when that happens, I might have to be really independent and take care of myself, or I might have to work really, really hard to get people to stay. Okay, we get a model for relationships from our earliest caregiving. There is, just kind of a side note, there's names for these attachment styles. I don't have time to get into it. I absolutely love talking about it. It's just today's not the time. But if you're interested to look into it, there's a lot of information out there. So as you can imagine, this carries over into our other relationships throughout our whole life. We are relational beings, and that never, ever goes away. Okay? In the same way that we're influenced by their primary caregivers when we're young, we continue to be influenced by those around us through our whole life, and we influence others. Okay? And essentially what happens is we perceive the world, we filter our experiences through our history. The good news is the history is not static. It's constantly changing. Okay? If your history has some hard things in it, we can change that. But we filter and define our experiences through what has happened to us in relationship. And then we respond and react accordingly. Okay? That makes a lot of sense if you really think about it. So for example, Let's say I have really good experiences with friends. Okay, I was growing up, had lots of good friends, lots of neighborhood fun. We would play and laugh and had sports teams together. I go to college, I make some good girlfriends. They're there to give me advice when I have, boy issues. They bring me coffee on a hard day. I have good relationships and learn that friends are there for you. So when my son's in the PICU, I can call a friend because my model tells me friends are there. Okay? What if on the other side of things I have bad experiences with neighbors? Let's say in college someone stole my mail. And then as a young adult, I asked a neighbor to maybe water my plants when I went on vacation and they forgot. When my husband and I buy our first house, I'm maybe not going to trust my neighbors, right? Because they've proven over my life to not be trustworthy until I have new experiences. And that's kind of benign, right? Plants, mail. What if I wanted them to watch my dog and they forgot for a week, right? I'd have a little more emotion about that. What if I asked a neighbor to meet my kindergartner at the bus stop because I was running late and they forgot and he was scared and crying and didn't know what to do? I would have a really big emotion about that because the things that matter most to us have an emotional reaction, okay? So let's talk about emotions for a minute. Important information has an emotional address. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't care. I actually say that to my kids all the time. They're not big fans of it. Mom, I don't care. Well, you wouldn't be mad if you didn't care, right? I don't get mad about the Timberwolves losing a game because I could care less about the Timberwolves. I know, sorry. Just being truthful. But if it's my son's soccer team, I got some emotion around that one because it matters to me, okay? Important information has an emotional address, another way that God designed us. So cool. So there's the Latin root for the word emotion. I do not speak Latin, so I can't tell you how to actually pronounce that. But it means to move, okay? Emotions bring us to action. They bring us to do something. That's exactly what they're designed for, okay? So I feel X, I respond Y. I feel happy, I might sing, I might dance, I might, talk to people about it, have a little bounce in my step. I feel sad, I cry, I might mope. I might go eat a tub of ice cream. That's seeking comfort, by the way, is what that's doing. If I'm angry, I might yell, I might stomp around, I might hit something, okay? Emotions move us to action. And remember, people influence us, and I influence other people. So that means my emotions and my actions are going to influence other people too. So let's think about like a positive situation, okay? I have these feelings. They're under the surface, right? Right now, you guys have no idea what I'm feeling because I haven't told you and I haven't shown you. I mean, maybe I kind of am showing you by my actions, but you don't really know. And our feelings are often directly associated with whether our needs are met. This is all under the surface. So let's say I'm having a good day. I have a little bounce in my step. I had some good news. I tend to kind of sing under my breath while I'm doing my work, that sort of a thing. Those are the actions you see above the surface. We can call them behaviors too. I like action tendencies because you can choose whether or not you follow through with them if you have that little bit of space. These impact the people around me, okay? And they directly impact their feelings. So let's say I have a coworker. I'm having a great day. I'm kind of bouncing, and they're maybe a little down, but they actually their need is a little pick-me-up. So my actions and my positivity could be contagious, and it could influence them, and that might increase their mood, improve it, and they might have different actions at that point too, right? Maybe they now just feel a little bit lighter in their day. It might bring a smile to their face just because they saw it in me. That's a positive feedback loop that we can get to in relationships. We can have negative feedback loops too on the very same emotions. I could be walking into work the very same way, a little bounce in my step, singing under my breath. I feel great. Let's say I just found out I was pregnant that morning, right? I want to tell somebody about this. I'm excited. This is good things, a good thing to feel happy about. What if I don't know that my coworker in the cubicle next to me is dealing with infertility? All of a sudden, my actions, they influence her feelings, right? But in a different way. And she's sad, and she's heartbroken. What she actually needs is comfort, but I don't know that. So what she might do instead is push me away. She might cancel the lunch plans that we had to talk about the project we're working on because it's just too hard. That makes sense because right now I told you what she's going through. If I didn't know what she was going through, I might be offended. What? We have this big project coming up, okay? We were planning this lunch to work on this project. How could you cancel our lunch? I could confront her about that. How's that going to make her feel? It's not going to help, and it becomes one big feedback loop, okay? Our feelings, our actions impact other people's feelings and their actions, and it can be positive or negative. Our closest relationships, this happens too, okay? And the thing with our closest relationships is there's more under the surface. So I want to spend a little time talking about that because when I think of longing for deeper connection, I think of closer relationships, okay? I'm guessing most people aren't worried about deeper connection with their coworkers. You might, right? You want a good working relationship with them. But when we think of really depth of connection, we're thinking the people that are closest to us. And the reason that there's a little bit more at stake here is because of our attachment needs that are under the surface. So if you remember earlier, I talked about the fact that we need to be safe. Actually, wait, I'm going to back up. Let me define what a close attachment relationship is first. The obvious one, parent-child, okay? But that changes through time, right? You don't spend your whole life just with mom and dad, okay? As you grow up, your circles of influence expand, your close relationships expand, and your attachment relationships expand. If you get married, that's your primary attachment relationship as an adult. Okay, but this can also be close friends, other family members, maybe a mentor, okay? We have people in our life who we have a close emotional bond with. We desire to be near them more times than not, right? We may seek comfort and safety from them. We might feel actually distressed when we're away from them. So my coworker, I might miss her at work if she's gone for a week. If it's my husband, that has a different impact, right? It's more significant. Okay, they serve at that base of security in your life. There's something different, inherently different about these types of relationships. Okay, so these are the ones I'm talking about. Usually there's like an exchange of comfort, care, those types of things in these types of relationships. So in these, this is where attachment needs are under the surface. So if we go back and think, I talked about being safe, seen, soothed, secure, to feel loved and like you belong, right? To feel valued, appreciated. These are always under the surface of these close relationships, okay? And whether they are met or not met, they lead to what we call primary emotions, okay? This is just how it works. If our attachment needs are met, we usually have positive primary emotions. We're content, we're happy, we feel loved, we feel satisfied. This leads to usually those positive feedback loops, because that's the place we're operating from. When these needs are not met, however, and that can be because sometimes just life happens, right? But sometimes there's distress in relationships. Sometimes you have those relationships where you just feel disconnected, and so you don't have those needs met on a regular basis. Then those primary relationships become a little more uncomfortable, okay? There are things like loneliness, sadness, hurt, abandonment, rejection, right? Betrayal, maybe. Like even when I say those words, those are hard emotions to feel. Like I feel them in my stomach. Nobody likes to feel that way. And when you're in a secure relationship, you can feel that way and you can share it with the other person and they can give you that comfort. But if your relationship is in a place of disconnection or distress, you suddenly don't feel safe. Not suddenly, you just don't feel safe always sharing that. So then what happens is we develop what's called secondary emotions. These are more comfortable to feel. And again, this is because I maybe don't feel safe. Ideally, we want to be able to share those hard things with the people around us. But when we can't, they're so uncomfortable and they cause that angst in us so much that we cover them up. This is just how we work in the world, okay? We cover them up and we mask them. And these are often things like anger, frustration, annoyance, okay? And they come with meanings and perceptions, and stories that we tell ourselves to rationalize the fact that I can feel angry because I don't want to face the sadness. Okay? And this happens in milliseconds, you guys. We're not always thinking through this. So let me give you an example. Let's say that my husband and I are at a state of disconnection. And let's say I'm feeling really like unseen and unloved. There could be a lot of different ways, right? Or a lot of different reasons. This does happen in people's lives. And I feel just really abandoned by him, right? Like he hasn't been there for me. He's been really busy at work and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to share him that for some reason. And so then I might instead blame him for that. Well, it's because he's not there for me. He's been at work too much, right? Those are the meanings and the perceptions I start to make, because it makes more sense if I can feel mad at him for making me feel this way than just recognize the fact that I have this need that hasn't been met. Okay? And so if I then tell myself that I'm going to be angry about the fact that he's been busy and about the fact that he's working too much and that kind of stuff, my action tendencies are going to be really different than if I can recognize that I feel sad and lonely and long for this connection that just isn't there this week because he's been really busy. So my action tendencies might look like blaming or criticizing. You are always at work. You always care too much about that job. You're not at the kids' sporting events. You're not there for me when I need you. You're not even here for dinner. You don't help with the dishes because you're tired at night. You just go watch that baseball game, right? What's that going to do? That's going to walk right down to his attachment needs, because he likely needs to feel respected and valued and appreciated for all the hard work he's doing at home to make a living for our family. And so me not appreciating that leaves him feeling underappreciated, dismissed, rejected. We're not in this place in our relationship right now where he can share that with me. So instead, he covers that up with more anger and frustration and annoyance and his own meanings that, oh, you always just rag on me. It's always about the dishes. It's always about the kids. You don't really care. You don't really see what I'm doing, right? And that could come in those same things. He could just say those things to me, or he might just think them in his head and withdraw. Forget it. It's not worth it. I'm going downstairs. I'm watching the game. She's on her own, right? I'm guessing some of you guys can relate to that sort of a dynamic, because it happens, and it's part of life, right? And one thing I want to make sure that we hear is it can happen and it can be repaired, right? This is part of relationships, okay? We live with other people, we influence other people. It's when we get stuck in these places that we need to be concerned. But this is just how relationships work, okay? So what do we learn from these things? Plain and simple. Relationships are one big feedback loop, okay? That's what they are. Positive or negative, they're one big feedback loop. In our closest relationships, primary emotion and attachment needs are under the surface. Always. This is the thing that I don't think people realize and can really leave people feeling stuck, is that they don't realize that there's other needs and emotions under the surface. It's really easy to see above the line, okay? It's really easy to see the anger and the frustration and the annoyance and the blame and the messages that are told and the withdrawal and the pursuit and the criticism. It's really hard to look under the surface. These feedback loops can be negative or positive. So when we are in that negative place, we have what's called a negative bias of survival. This is, again, how we're wired. I'm really grateful for the negative bias of survival in the times that I need it, right? If I live in a place where I have to worry about a bear coming at me, I'm really grateful that the rustling in the woods makes my alarm system go off. Okay, I don't have time to sit and decide if there's a bear there or not. I'm glad I can just get safe, right? Because a negative bias of survival doesn't look at nuances. It looks at patterns. So it recognizes that last time I heard rustling in the woods, it was a bear. It doesn't care that this time it's just a squirrel until I have time to recognize it, right? So I'm thankful for it in some moments because it does keep us safe, but it also impacts our ability to tune into ourselves and to tune into the other person we're in a relationship with, okay? Because it's protection at all costs. Our negative bias of survival wants to protect us, and that makes it hard to recognize the nuances. So when these negative feedback loops also unfortunately perpetuate, then more disconnection, right? That's what can happen and can leave us feel really stuck. But when they're positive, we're more flexible in our thinking, right? We can understand and identify our needs. We can be accessible to other people. We can be there for them. And maybe have that safe haven and secure base kind of feeling that they're there for us, okay? And we can tackle the world. And underneath all this, I hope we can learn that behaviors actually make sense. If we know what's under the line, the way that we respond and the way that somebody else in our life responds always makes sense. We just might have to go back in history and kind of connect the dots sometimes, okay? So our roadmap, this is what we want to hear, right? What do we do about it? How do we make these connections more stable? How do we get deeper in these relationships where maybe we feel like that negative pattern comes up too often? Let's take a little hint from this video first.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. I love that every time I watch it. What aren't you looking for? That's the first and probably the most important step, is recognizing that there's something under the line and you may not be looking for it or paying attention to it. A lot of us have seen the iceberg analogy or the image. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I put it in here because it's familiar to people. The thing I don't like about it is it makes it seem like what's under the surface is ominous. It's going to sink the Titanic. I don't want us to look at feelings and needs that way, but it's familiar. And so if that sticks in your head and you can use that in a good way, do that. I like to think about it as a tree with roots, okay? We all have roots that go deep into our histories. We all have roots that speak about our needs, and it's the health of those roots and what's under the surface that determines the health of the leaves, okay? Our behaviors are the leaves. And so in your relationships, if you want a deeper connection, you need to look deeper into what's going on. Look under the surface. Every single behavior seeks to meet some sort of need. Everything that we do. Okay? Relationships take intentionality. Healthy relationships take intentionality. Okay? We need to create emotional safety. And there's ways to do that, right? This is talking about wanting a deeper relationship, wanting to create safety. One of the ways we can do that is with just presence. Being really aware. Too often we can get stuck in the past, or we're projecting the future, if we're honest. Can we be present right now in this place, in this relationship, and know that regardless of what our history says, right now in this very moment, we're safe, okay? Right now, I can be curious about what you're experiencing. I can be non-judgmental about what's coming up in me, and I can be present here. And that's going to create and welcome and invite deeper connection. Openness is kind of along the same term, or same lines. If you're able to be present, you can be open to more and new information. If I knew something that I didn't know, would this behavior make sense? If I knew the context, right? Set an intention to understand the person that you want a deeper connection with. Loving kindness. This really is tied to compassion, self-compassion, and compassion for other people. Pain and suffering and disconnection is part of the human experience, unfortunately, right now on this side of heaven, right? And the more that we can recognize that, we can be lovingly kind to other people because we recognize that they have a story, I have a story. Our stories might just be knocking heads right now. And so it also helps you remember that you're not alone in this. Okay? That's the thing about relationships too. Everything we do, it impacts you, it impacts the other, and it impacts the relationship. You're all going through this. And you're not alone in it. The enemy wants you to think that you are, but you're not. All humans struggle with this, and that can just allow a sense of grace and compassion for yourself as well as the person you're in relationship with, and that can help deepen that sense of connection. You need to be intentionally connecting with each other, okay? Attention is relational currency. Being next to somebody does not equal being with somebody, okay? Being next to somebody does not equal being with somebody, okay? It's different to give somebody your attention, to actually look them in the eye when you're having a conversation, to put the phone down, okay? To completely keep it out of the room so you don't hear the buzz, right? Eye contact is really important. We have these mirror neurons, like in this part of our brain, kind of right here, and they are often triggered through eye contact. And mirror neurons are a gift from God. They are what allows us to attune to the other person and actually share an emotional experience with them. They're what's activated when you tear up when you see somebody else cry. Like most of us have had that experience. It's because you have these really cool things in your head that attune to the other person and their emotional experience. One way to kind of engage both of these things as you're looking someone in the eye and you're hoping to attune to them is to actually tell yourself, like think in your head, I love you, okay? If that's appropriate in the relationship. I love you. I mean, that just sets your whole like being in a different place. And your mirror neurons will come online and they will start to receive that kind of message and you will naturally more attune to each other, okay? And listen well. Okay, a lot of us listen to respond. Often, too often. Listening well is really listening to understand. And a good way to kind of ask yourself if you're doing this is ask yourself, what haven't I heard yet? Okay, not how can I respond to this, but what haven't I heard yet? Will keep you open to that new information to listen well. So as you put some of these things into practice and you intentionally present yourself different in a relationship, that's where the correction happens, okay? It's a way of being. It's not a big conversation. It's not, resolving a certain conflict. It's being different on a regular basis in the relationship with that awareness of things that are under the surface. And the last thing that I want to make sure to address in this realm is the power of repair, okay? Because we are not going to get it right every time. We're not. And the number one predictor of healthy relationships, thankfully, is not whether or not you get into conflict or how often you do, but whether or not you can repair it. That's huge, okay? Granted, if every interaction is negative, the repair starts to not make a difference, right? But it's kind of like the more times than not with healthy attachment. It's not about when you get it wrong. It's about what do you do when you get it wrong. How can you repair? So healthy repair is taking ownership for your part of the situation and for how it impacts the other person, okay? Sometimes when we apologize or we attempt to repair, we're actually doing it to make ourselves feel better. It's not about that. It's about saying, this is what I did, and I see how it impacted you. And that's what I want to repair. I want to address the pain. I want to address the hurt. I want to tell you that that's not what I hope to happen. I don't want to do that again. And one other thing that I think is important, we could have a whole session on repair. I wish we had more time. And so I don't want to throw these out there too quickly, but I think they're important enough to mention. Forgiveness and emotional healing are not the same thing. I think for healthy repair, especially as Christians, forgiveness is really important for us. I think it's really critical, but it does not mean you're necessarily healed from the hurt, okay? Sometimes people can forgive and then seek the emotional healing in the relationship. Sometimes people forgive as part of the emotional healing, and sometimes it is after. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I just want to make sure that you don't hear any sort of message that if you forgive, everything's better and you move on, okay? Because there's this repair piece, this emotional healing that needs to happen, and there's lots of details in that, again, like I said, based on what kind of hurt and that sort of thing. But what I want you guys to hear is when you're wanting to deepen the connection and really longing for that in these closest relationships in your life, the repair is really important. And there's a lot of power in that. Because we're going to hurt each other. And hurt people. Just humans hurt people. We're human. So as I wrap up, I just want to also encourage you guys with the fact that God is our ultimate attachment. Okay? If we go back to the very beginning of what I was talking about, we were designed in his image. And he is the ultimate source of security for us. He's our ultimate safe haven. He is the place we can have our needs met and our longings met. And we can learn a lot through our relationship with him and how we can relate to other people. I also truly believe that he'll be gracious and he'll be compassionate for you guys wherever you're on your journeys, if you trust him with that, right? He was that way for me, as we had to learn these things the hard way with our kids. He was gracious and he was compassionate. And I learned so much more about even my relationship with him as I learned about human relationships too and how we're designed. So I want to thank you again for coming. I think we have a few minutes.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes for some questions.
Yeah.
And let's give Tiffany a hand, though. That was awesome. Anybody wanted to come back and do the power repair at a future Lunch and Learn? I think amazing job. And one of the things we love doing at Lunch and Learns is to bring in great Christian therapists from around the Twin Cities who are working in this arena. And Tiffany, you did an amazing job today. So, you can have a second ovation there. That's it's worthy of that. So, who's got questions today? And we're going to start right over here. Yeah, there's a familiar face, right?
Brian. I love safe, seen, soothed, and secure. Is heard implied somewhere in there?
Yeah, I would say heard is implied with the seen. It's kind of seen and heard. Those 4 S's come from Dan Siegel's work. He's a neurobiologist, interpersonal neurobiologist who has done a lot of work on attachment and actually how the brain works in attachment. He likes alliterations. So he liked the 4 S's, I think, is why he had those. But I would say seen and heard are hand in hand.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Do you have any written thing?
Me?
Yeah,
No.
are your notes not available?
Oh, I didn't. My notes are just like the things I want to say. I could print this PowerPoint if that's helpful. But, it's just kind of the outline. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So if you
Okay.
want to email me at the Family Resource Initiative, we can, if you're fine with us sharing that, we'll share that. Yeah, this is great.
Sure.
And we'll be publishing a book with Tiffany soon. So amazing, Tiffany, amazing. All right, somebody else. Questions? Yep.
I'll make you run. Thank you. All right, you got me. So when I was young, my father told me, and I remember this vividly, it's our duty to control our own emotions because otherwise we get ourselves into big trouble. So what I've found over the years is the thing that limited my control was my expectations of others. And I found over the years that if I don't have expectations on others, I don't have problems with them. Do you run into that same situation? Because yours whole thing was on emotions. And if we control our own emotions, I think we find ourselves in less issues because of it.
It's a good question. I like to say that unmet expectations lead to resentment. So sometimes in order to survive, we learn to change our expectations, right? And there's a time and a place for that. But emotions, yes, I am an emotionally focused therapist. That's actually the theory that I go from, so that's probably obvious. But I really, truly find it goes hand in hand with attachment too, because I think it is a part of our experience, but when it's uncomfortable, we can learn to ignore them. We can learn to shove them down. We can learn to do all sorts of things to manage them because they can be uncomfortable, okay? So if being let down by other people was uncomfortable, it's easier to tell yourself, not easier, sorry, that is not true. it serves you well to tell yourself, I'm not going to have an expectation because I don't want to feel this way. It feels horrible to be let down, okay? And so then that's kind of that whole, all of our behaviors make sense if we understand the story. So with that little bit that you shared with me, it makes a lot of sense that over time you internalize that and probably have learned to maybe give attention to some emotions and not to others because of how they feel or what their comfort level is, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's more just protecting yourself.
Right. Yes.
More
absolutely.
than anything else, but
Yep.
at the same time, understanding that you can't put your expectations on others.
That's
so
right.
you get into less conflicts because of that.
That can be true. It can be true if your expectations lead to conflict. Generally, we still have an emotion about it, and are we okay with the emotion that comes, right? Whether or not the conflict, and then is this a relationship where that emotion can be present in this relationship? And that's generally the indicator of conflict or not, where there's some relationships where that emotion is welcomed and some where it's not. And so we choose, do I allow it to be in this place or do I push it aside? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Awesome. We've got time for 2 more questions before we end at 1. So who's got a question out here? Otherwise, Tiffany has said she's willing to stick around if you want to talk to her personally. I know that what we've talked about today can be highly personal too, but any other questions? All right. Well, Tiffany, thank you for all going.
No, so I guess my question is, do you see that there tends to be any difference in age-wise? Like, for those of us who may be interacting with preteens, adolescents, just kind of where does, any advice just along like the age spans? Just about, okay, that was really big, but that's a big question. But any suggestions for
That'll be our last question today. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Good question. I think the principles are the same. They're lifelong, right? It just looks a little bit different in terms of how a 3-year-old responds to their emotions. And then, over time, kind of like we were just talking about a little bit, we learn what's acceptable in our circles of emotional expression, what's not, that sort of a thing. And so really my kind of approach to this as I've learned all this and how I help my clients and things like that is recognizing your own internal emotional experience and being okay with that, right? I think a lot of times we can be afraid of emotions. I don't know if this is directly answering you, but it's where my brain's going. We can be afraid of them, right, for different reasons. And so the more that we can tune into them and say, okay, this is what I'm experiencing, they actually come and go, right? Emotions are waves, and sometimes they can feel like they're like overwhelming. And I think I'm thinking of teenagers when you're with your question, right? It can feel so overwhelming that we might just want to pretend it's not there and look the other way. So when I think of it, engaging with different age groups, I think of maybe helping with the comfort with the emotional experience, but yet also being mindful of there are safe relationships to share things and not safe ones, right? We don't want to be emotional vomiters, right? There are places that there are safe relationships to share your emotions with, different emotions, the more vulnerable ones. And there are places that maybe that wouldn't be safe. So there's some of those pieces too, but I don't think that there's like direct things I could give you about each age group, but age appropriately, how you teach a 3-year-old to handle sadness and how you teach a 15-year-old to handle sadness. First, they just have to recognize that they're sad, okay? And that can look different based on their life experiences and things like that, if that helps. Okay.
Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate you being with us today. If you're interested in learning more about what Tiffany does in her counseling practice, you can go to bobendriercounseling.com, right? Yeah, does that work? All right. So, but love for you to get to hear a little bit more there. We've got a number of therapists again that come to our lunch and learns. You're going to get to hear from more of them this summer. So all summer long, our theme is going to be kind of a big, healthy summer, and we're going to be talking about our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, our emotional health, and kind of tying that in throughout the summer. And so we've got a lot to look forward to coming up in June, July, August as as well. 2 weeks from today is our next Lunch and Learn, and our speakers are going to be Jill and Brian Dejewski. We got to know Jill at Wooddale Church years ago because of a junior high mission trip to a mobile home community in Corcoran. And it was a passion that Jill, who was a youth pastor at Wayzata Evangelical Free Church at that time and a friend of Heather Fleece's, shared with Heather what they were doing. We joined them, and it's been an incredible partnership. Well, she and her husband actually moved to the mobile home community that they were serving for a number of years, and they're going to be talking about how do you move from kind of good intentions to intentional relationships. So kind of continue that relational theme, but when we're serving others, how do we not really serve without hurting and really understand the relationships there. Then we're going to be talking about active listening in April. We've got Sinai Thao, who is our new director of Celebrate Recovery, who is going to be sharing a little bit about his own story of recovery and how do you help someone in addiction, and then finally how to read the room with Derek Barenwald in April. So encourage you to come back out for that. Have a great week. Thank you for joining us. Tiffany, I'll stick around for a little bit if you've got some questions. So thank you.